The rain hadn't let up since dawn, and by the time we stepped out of St. Paul's Church, the gray Seattle sky felt like it had settled into my bones. William Harper had been more than my grandfather. He'd been the steady voice in a life too often ruled by sharp words and colder silences. The service was quiet, dignified, filled with faces from the community he'd built so much for. My father, Edward, stood front and center accepting condolences like a politician on election night. His handshakes were firm, his smile measured. I thought maybe for once grief had softened him. That hope didn't last long. Hours later, the mourners gone, the scent of damp flowers still heavy in the air. I found myself in the estate's drawing room. I was sipping lukewarm coffee, staring at the old pine mantel where William used to rest his arm when telling me one of his stories. Edward walked in, his expression stripped of the polite mask he'd worn all day. "It's done," he said flatly. "The estate transfer is official. 400 million locked in my name." He said it like a man announcing the weather, then let a small smirk curl his mouth. I nodded slowly, unsure what he expected me to say. He didn't give me the chance. "You're useless now." The words hung there too absurd to register at first. "Excuse me, you've coasted long enough," he said, his tone cutting clean through the air. "Pack your things. I want you out of the house by morning." For a moment, I couldn't feel my hands. This was my father, the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd lectured me about ambition, now looking at me like I was a piece of unwanted furniture. I stood, forcing my spine straight, even as my chest tightened. Fine. My voice didn't shake. I wouldn't give him that. I walked out of the room, the echo of my footsteps following me down the long hall toward the bedroom that had never really felt like mine. I grew up in a house where silence was a form of control. Edward's rules were precise and absolute. No slammed doors, no talking back, and never under any circumstance challenge his decisions. My earliest memories of him are measured in corrections. Posture, too slouched; tone, too sharp; ambitions, too unrealistic. By the time I was 10, I'd learned to keep my victories to myself. If I brought home an A, he'd ask why it wasn't an A+. If I won an award, he'd wonder aloud how many other kids hadn't bothered to compete. Praise was rare, and when it came, it felt more like a footnote than a celebration. William was different. My grandfather's presence was like stepping into a warm patch of sunlight after being indoors too long. He didn't push me to be perfect. He asked me what I wanted, and then listened, really listened to the answer. When I was 15, I told him I wanted to work in finance to understand the currents that moved money and power. Edward scoffed, called it a man's world. William just smiled and told me to learn everything I could. Years later, when I was accepted into a competitive graduate program, Edward dismissed it as a waste of time and money. I remember sitting on the porch with William that night, my acceptance letter in my lap, wondering if I should turn it down. He sipped his iced tea, then quietly slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a cashier's check large enough to cover my tuition for the first year. "Don't tell him," William said. "This is between us. Consider it an investment in someone worth investing in." That was William believing in me when it cost him something. Now, standing in my childhood bedroom with a half-packed suitcase, I thought of that night and the quiet pride in his eyes. Edward could strip me of this house, but he couldn't erase the foundation William had given me. As I reached for another hanger, something hard shifted inside the lining of my old bookshelf. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Within days of the funeral, the warmth William had brought to the estate seemed to evaporate, replaced by something sharper, colder. Doors that had always been left open were now locked. The library, the sunroom, even the small study where William kept his records, each handle rattled uselessly when I tried it. The staff people I'd known for years avoided my eyes. Ellen, the housekeeper who used to sneak me muffins from the kitchen, gave only curt nods, now her hands busy with tasks that didn't need doing. When I asked if something was wrong, she murmured Mr. Harper's instructions before hurrying away. At dinner, Edward spoke as if I weren't there. He discussed moving forward with an air of finality, talking about renovations, new investments, and streamlining the household in ways that made it clear I wasn't part of his plans. His voice carried the satisfaction of someone cutting away what he considered dead weight. Back in my room, I tried to focus on packing. My fingers skimmed along the spines of books I'd kept since high school comfort, in a time when I'd needed safe places to hide my thoughts. One, a thick biography William had given me on my 18th birthday, slid forward more easily than the others. When I pulled it free, something small and firm shifted inside. I flipped it open and found a sealed envelope tucked deep between the last few pages. My name, Mia, in William's steady hand, stood out against the cream paper. I sat on the edge of the bed, tearing the seal with careful fingers. Inside was a single piece of stationery, the ink faint but deliberate. The will protects those who protect others. No explanation, no context, just that one line weighty enough to stop me cold. I read it again, tracing the words as if more meaning might appear. William had hidden it for me to find. Not Edward, not anyone else. I folded the note back into the envelope and slid it into my bag, my mind already turning over what it could mean. Edward's study smelled faintly of cigar smoke and polished leather, the same as it had when William used it, only now the warmth was gone. Edward sat behind the heavy walnut desk, leaning back in William's old chair, as though it had always belonged to him. A crystal tumbler of whiskey rested at his elbow, half full, catching the light from the desk lamp. "Sit," he said, not looking up from the papers in front of him. I didn't move until he finally raised his eyes, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I suppose you've heard." He began as though the whole city wasn't already buzzing. 400 million. All mine. William was generous. His voice carried no trace of grief, only the satisfaction of someone who'd just won a game they'd stacked in their favor. I stayed quiet, letting him fill the air. "You've had a long, comfortable stay here, Mia," he continued, his tone shifting to something colder. "But you're not a child anymore. You're a financial burden. And frankly, you've been coasting." He said it like a verdict, not an opinion. I almost laughed. I'd been working since I was 16, paying my own way through most of grad school, thanks to William, not him, but arguing now would be like shouting into the wind. "I want you out by morning," he said, leaning forward, elbows on the desk. "No drama, no drawn-out goodbyes. This is my house now, and I decide who belongs here." His gaze lingered on me, waiting for the crack, the flinch, the desperate protest. I felt the weight of William's note in my pocket, the words burning against my leg. The will protects those who protect others. I straightened my shoulders. Fine. No tremor in my voice. No hesitation. I rose, turned, and walked out without another word. Upstairs, I finished packing the last of my clothes into the worn leather suitcase William had given me years ago. The envelope stayed in my coat pocket as if moving it might weaken whatever strength it had given me in that room. By the time the grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9, my bags were by the door. I didn't look back when I stepped outside into the cool Seattle night. By the next afternoon, I was hauling my suitcase up the narrow staircase of a brick walk-up in downtown Seattle. The apartment was barely big enough for me to stretch my arms without touching both walls, but it was mine. No locked doors, no eyes watching to see if I measured up. I'd sold a few pieces of jewelry Edward had given me over the years, gifts more for show than sentiment. The cash wasn't much, but it was enough to cover the deposit and my first month's rent. My job as a financial analyst let me work remotely, so I set up my laptop on the little kitchen table and kept my hours steady, forcing normalcy into the chaos. Still at night, I'd catch myself pulling the envelope from my coat pocket, rereading William's words, "The will protects those who protect others." It didn't sound like something he'd say casually, and it certainly didn't sound like a message meant for Edward. I started digging quietly, public records, probate filings, even old news articles about estates with unusual clauses. Most of it was noise, but every so often I'd find something that made my pulse jump, trusts that released funds only under specific conditions, wills tied to joint ventures or community projects. William had been meticulous in everything he did. It was possible, maybe even likely, that his will carried the same precision. 3 days after I moved in, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me swipe to answer. "Mia Harper." The voice said crisp professional with an undercurrent of dry amusement. "This is Laura Bennett. I was your grandfather's attorney." A pause deliberate. "We should talk about his will. It's unusual." There was a flicker of satisfaction in her tone, like she was holding back from saying more until we were face to face. I sat up straighter. How unusual. She gave a short, knowing laugh. Let's just say your father's week is about to get a lot more complicated. Can you come to my office tomorrow? I glanced at the envelope on the table, my mind already racing ahead. Laura Bennett's office was nothing like I expected. No polished walnut or antique rugs, just clean lines, muted colors, and a wall of neatly labeled files. She gestured for me to sit across from her desk, then folded her hands, studying me with the kind of look that says she already knows more than she's letting on. "I've been waiting for you to call," she began. "Your grandfather anticipated certain dynamics in this family." I arched a brow, meaning my father. "Meaning exactly your father," she said, pulling a thick binder toward her. "William placed his estate everything in a trust. Edward cannot access a cent of the $400 million unless specific conditions are met." I leaned forward, pulse quickening. What conditions? Her lips curved slightly like she'd been waiting for that question. "He must complete a community redevelopment project that meets city approval and William's philanthropic standards, and he must do it with you as co-executive. Equal authority, equal signature rights." I sat back, trying to process. "You're saying he can't do it without me?" "Correct." "There's more," she continued. "During the 12 months it takes to complete the project, there can be no lawsuits between you and Edward, no public estrangement, and no formal withdrawal from the arrangement by either party. Any violation and the trust dissolves and the money Laura flipped to the final page of the clause. Half would go to the charities William named, the other half directly to you." For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the air conditioner. I thought about Edward in his study smug, and certain he'd already won. I thought about him telling me I was useless. "William really planned this," I murmured. "He wanted to ensure the person he trusted most was in a position to protect his legacy," Laura said. "And that person wasn't your father." I traced my fingers along the edge of the desk, a slow, deliberate motion. "When does Edward find out?" Laura's smile widened just slightly. "He already has." I felt the shift in my chest, anticipation steady and cold. Then I suppose I should be expecting a knock at my door. It didn't take long. Less than 24 hours after leaving Laura's office, there was a sharp knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, Edward stood there, expensively dressed, but the edges frayed. His face was pale, a faint sheen of sweat along his hairline. "Mia," he said, forcing a smile. "Thought we should talk family to family." I stepped aside without a word, letting him into the cramped living room. He glanced around, eyes lingering on the second-hand furniture like it was a personal insult. "The bank tells me there's been a misunderstanding." He began, settling onto the sofa. "Funds are tied up in some sort of trust. Ridiculous red tape." His tone was light, but I could hear the strain under it. "It's not a misunderstanding," I said. "It's the will." He waved a dismissive hand. "Your grandfather was sentimental. I'm sure we can work around it." He leaned forward, softening his voice. "You and I, blood is blood. We've had our differences, but we can come together now. Make this work for both of us." William's words flickered in my mind. "Don't react. Negotiate." "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked evenly. "That you sign whatever is needed so I can move forward. You'll get something, of course." I held his gaze. "That's not how it's written." His smile thinned. "Mia, I'm offering you a way to make this painless." "You think you can run a multi-million-dollar project without me? You'll sink us both." The threat was there, coiled under the words, but I didn't flinch. "If you want the money," I said, "you'll follow the terms. All of them." A muscle in his jaw twitched. For a moment, I thought he might explode, but instead, he stood straightening his jacket. "Think about it," he said, and walked out without another glance. I closed the door behind him, already knowing I wouldn't need to. He'd be back. 2 days after our first meeting, I had the agreement ready. Laura had helped me refine it, each clause crafted with the same precision William had used in his will. Edward would publicly acknowledge me as co-executive, cover my living costs for the duration of the project, and transfer 3 specific estate properties into my name outright. No conditions, no reversals. When I slid the document across Laura's conference table, Edward's eyes skimmed it, then flicked up to me. "You can't be serious." Every word I said. He leaned back, crossing his arms. I'm not signing this. You're extorting me. I didn't blink. The will is extorting you. I'm just giving you a way forward. For the next week, he stalled, claimed he was busy with other matters, sent back pages with red ink scrawled across the margins. He even consulted another lawyer, a sharp-suited man who lasted one meeting before quietly confirming the truth. William's language was airtight. Without my cooperation, Edward's $400 million might as well have been buried in the ground. When he finally returned to Laura's office, he was quieter. Not defeated exactly, but there was a weight in his posture, a tightness around his mouth. He picked up the pen, rolled it between his fingers, and signed each page with quick, sharp strokes. Laura notarized it, her expression neutral, though I caught the faintest glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. Edward pushed the signed packet toward me, his knuckles white. I hope you know what you're doing, Mia. I do, I said, tucking the agreement into my folder. We stood the air between us, heavy with everything unspoken. He left without shaking my hand, the door clicking shut behind him. For the first time in years, I felt the balance shift, not just in paperwork, but in power. And it was only the beginning. The waterfront lot had been little more than a patch of cracked asphalt and weeds when we began. William's plans called for something alive. Glass walls opening to the harbor classrooms for job training and space for local markets on weekends. From the first week, I made it my business to know every detail. I walked the site with the contractors each morning, reviewed invoices at night, and built relationships with the city officials whose signatures we needed. The more I showed up, the more the crews looked to me for decisions. Edward hated it. He showed up late to meetings, floated ideas to trim the budget that ignored both code and William's vision. Whenever I refused, he muttered about me being impossible to work with, but he never tried to shut me out. He couldn't. The will made sure of that. The press loved the story Harper Family Unites to honor Patriarch's dream. They photographed us side by side, smiling for the cameras. In the glossy spreads, we looked like a team. Behind those smiles, every conversation was a negotiation. By month 11, the center's steel frame was complete glass panels catching the morning sun. Edward stood with me on the balcony overlooking the water, watching crews set the final supports. You've handled yourself better than I expected. He said the words clipped but genuine. Better than you wanted, I replied. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Maybe. It wasn't trust. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was an acknowledgement, however grudging, that I wasn't the liability he'd painted me to be. And in a few weeks, the project would be finished and the will's conditions met. The ribbon cutting drew a crowd large enough to spill onto the sidewalks. City leaders, reporters, and families from the neighborhood gathered under a bright spring sun, the new community center gleaming behind us. Edward stood to my left, hands clasped, smile practiced. The cameras loved him, but the speeches weren't his to give. That was William's stipulation and mine. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the podium. I spoke about William's belief that wealth meant little if it didn't lift others. I thanked the contractors, volunteers, and the community who'd worked alongside us. I didn't mention Edward. The applause started slow, then built into something steady and warm, rolling over the courtyard. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Edward's expression tighten, his jaw set, as the focus stayed on me. By the end of the day, the trust's conditions were fulfilled. Edward would have his fortune. I had something different, 3 prime estate properties in my name, and the public credit for bringing William's vision to life. As the crowd dispersed, I slipped away down the side path, my heels clicking against the new brickwork. The center stood behind me, alive with voices exactly as William had imagined. I didn't look back at Edward. I didn't need to. I'd taken the part of my family's legacy worth keeping and left the rest in the past. Mia Harper learns a profound lesson about resilience, self-worth, and the power of legacy in the face of betrayal. Cast out by her father Edward, who deems her useless after inheriting William's $400 million estate, Mia discovers her grandfather's hidden note. The will protects those who protect others. This cryptic message, coupled with the revelation that Edward's fortune hinges on her cooperation in a community project, shifts her perspective. Rather than succumbing to her father's dismissal, Mia leverages the will's conditions to reclaim her agency. She navigates Edward's manipulations with strategic calm, securing her role as co-executive and ultimately gaining properties and public recognition. Through this, Mia realizes that true strength lies not in wealth or familial approval, but in honoring those like William who believed in her potential. His trust empowers her to redefine her place in the family's legacy, proving her worth through action and perseverance. Mia's journey teaches her that legacy is not inherited wealth but the impact one creates, and self-worth is forged by standing firm against those who seek to diminish it.
The notification popped up on my phone at exactly 9:47 p.m. while I was reviewing code in my cramped studio apartment. My sister Victoria had posted another Instagram story from her promotion party at the Meridian Hotel's rooftop bar. The caption read, "Family success without the loser. Party popper finally made senior marketing director at 28. Mom, dad, and my amazing husband celebrating the right way. #success, #family, #no dead weight." I could see our parents in the background, raising champagne flutes with Victoria's husband Derek. The whole scene looked like something from a lifestyle magazine: designer dresses, expensive suits, city lights twinkling behind them. Everyone looked radiant, successful, complete. And I wasn't there. This wasn't unusual. For the past 3 years since I'd dropped out of law school to start what my family called playing with computers, I'd been systematically excluded from family celebrations. Not formally disinvited, just forgotten. Plans made around me, reservations for everyone but me, group chats I mysteriously wasn't added to. The loser had become Victoria's favorite nickname for me, and it had stuck with the whole family. I scrolled through the comments on her post. Hundreds of congratulations, heart emojis, and praise for her amazing achievement. Victoria had indeed worked hard to climb the corporate ladder at Morrison & Associates, one of the city's most prestigious marketing firms. Her promotion to senior marketing director was genuinely impressive. I typed a simple comment, "Proud of you, party popper," and went back to my code. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Sarah. "Saw Victoria's post. That was harsh even for her. You okay?" Sarah was the only family member who still talked to me regularly. She'd been asking about my computer thing for months, genuinely curious about what I was building while everyone else dismissed it as a phase. "I'm fine," I texted back. "She earned the promotion. She deserves to celebrate. But calling you the loser publicly? In front of 2,400 people?" I looked at the post again. 2,400 likes and climbing. Victoria's social media presence had exploded over the past year as her career took off. She'd become the family's poster child for success, while I represented everything they feared: wasted potential, poor life choices, financial instability. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Victoria herself texting me directly. "Saw your comment," she wrote. "Appreciate you being mature about tonight. We really couldn't fit another person at the table anyway. You understand." I stared at the message. Even in her moment of triumph, she couldn't resist twisting the knife. "Of course," I replied. "Congratulations again." I set my phone aside and returned to my laptop. The code I was working on represented 3 years of 18-hour days, countless failed experiments, and more rejection letters than I cared to count. While Victoria was climbing the corporate ladder, I was building something entirely different: a revolutionary data analytics platform that could process customer behavior patterns in ways no existing software could match. My studio apartment was a testament to those 3 years of sacrifice. Ramen noodles, discount furniture, and a mattress on the floor. Every penny I could scrape together went into server costs, software licenses, and the occasional consultant fee when I hit technical roadblocks I couldn't solve alone. My family saw poverty and failure. I saw investment in something bigger. At 11:30 p.m. I was deep in debugging a particularly stubborn algorithm when my phone started buzzing incessantly. Instagram notifications, text messages, missed calls. I ignored them, focused on the code that was finally starting to work the way I'd envisioned. Then Sarah called. "Waya," she said breathlessly when I answered. "Check your phone. Check Instagram. Check everything." "I'm working," I said, still typing. "Can this wait?" "No, it absolutely cannot wait." Victoria's promotion party just turned into something very different. That got my attention. I minimized my coding window and opened Instagram. Victoria's story from earlier had been updated with new posts, but the tone had shifted dramatically. Instead of celebration, there was confusion, shock, and what looked like panic. The latest post was a video of Victoria staring at her phone, her face pale despite the professional makeup. Derek was leaning over her shoulder, both of them looking stunned. In the background, I could hear my parents asking what was wrong. "Sarah," I said slowly, "what am I looking at?" "Forbes dropped their 30 under 30 list an hour ago," Sarah said. "Tech category. You might want to check it out." I opened a new browser tab and navigated to Forbes.com. The headline dominated the homepage. Forbes 30 under 30, Technology, the Young Innovators Reshaping Industries. I scrolled through the list, reading about young entrepreneurs and tech prodigies who were changing the world. Each profile included a photo, a brief biography, and most importantly, the valuation of their companies or contributions. Then I saw it. Position number 3. Maya Chin, 26, founder and CEO of Nexus Analytics. My own photo stared back at me, the professional headshot I'd had taken 6 months ago when investors started taking meetings seriously. Below it was a description I hadn't expected to see for at least another year. Maya Chin dropped out of Harvard Law School to pursue what many called a foolish dream, creating artificial intelligence that could predict consumer behavior with unprecedented accuracy. 3 years later, her company Nexus Analytics has quietly revolutionized how Fortune 500 companies understand their customers. With preliminary valuations reaching $847 million following her Series C funding round, Chin represents a new generation of entrepreneurs who chose innovation over traditional career paths. Major clients include Amazon, Netflix, and Goldman Sachs, though Chen's famously private approach means most people have never heard her name. "I'm not building this for recognition," Chin told Forbes. "I'm building it because the technology can fundamentally change how businesses connect with people." I read the article 3 times, my heart pounding. Forbes had somehow gotten access to information I thought was still confidential. The Series C funding had just closed last week, $180 million that valued Nexus Analytics at $847 million. Making me the majority shareholder of a company worth nearly $1 billion. My phone was ringing again. "Maya," she said when I answered. "Are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it. $847 million? Apparently. And Victoria just called you the loser, in front of 2,400 people?" I was still staring at my Forbes profile, trying to process that my 3 years of 18-hour days had somehow resulted in this moment. "Sarah, I need to call you back." I hung up and immediately called my lawyer, David Restrepo, who had been handling the funding rounds and corporate structure. "Hiya," he answered on the first ring. "I was wondering when you'd call. Congratulations on the Forbes recognition. Though I have to ask, did you know they were running the profile tonight?" "I had no idea," I said. "David, how did they get the Series C numbers? That was supposed to be confidential." "Technically it was," he said, "but Forbes has sources everywhere. And honestly, Maya, you can't keep this quiet much longer. You're about to be one of the youngest female billionaires in tech history." The story was going to break eventually. Billionaire. The word hit me like cold water. "David, what exactly is my net worth right now? Based on your 62% ownership stake in the Series C valuation? Approximately $524 million. If the company hits the growth projections we showed investors, you'll cross the billion-dollar threshold within 18 months. I sat down heavily on my discount couch. $524 million. "Congratulations," David said warmly. "You've built something extraordinary. Your AI platform is already changing how 36 Fortune 500 companies operate. This recognition is well-deserved." After ending the call, I sat in my studio apartment, surrounded by the evidence of 3 years of sacrifice, holding a phone that contained notifications about an achievement I'd never dared imagine. My Instagram was exploding. The Forbes article had gone viral, and people were connecting my name to Victoria's "loser" post from earlier. Screenshots were being shared across platforms, creating a narrative I hadn't asked for but couldn't control. At 12:47 a.m. Victoria called me. "Maya," she said, her voice shaky. "I need to talk to you." "It's pretty late, Victoria. Please. I'm still at the hotel. Can you come down? Just for a few minutes." I looked around my studio apartment, my ramen noodle dinner dishes in the sink, my mattress on the floor, my 3-year-old laptop that had built a nearly billion-dollar company. Then I looked at the Forbes article still open on my screen. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The Meridian Hotel's rooftop bar was nearly empty when I arrived. Victoria sat alone at a corner table, still in her celebration dress but with her makeup smeared from crying. The champagne glasses and party decorations looked surreal in the dim lighting. "Maya," she said as I approached. "I'm so sorry." I sat down across from her. "For what?" "For everything. For tonight's post. For the past 3 years. For calling you." She couldn't finish the sentence. "The loser." I supplied gently. She nodded, fresh tears starting. "I had no idea what you were building. None of us did. I tried to tell you," I said. "Remember 2 years ago at Christmas when I tried to explain the AI platform? Dad said I was playing with toys and Mom suggested I go back to law school before it was too late." Victoria winced. "We thought we were helping." "I know. Maya, the Forbes article, it says your company is worth nearly $1 billion. That's what the investors think it's worth, yes. And you own most of it?" 62%. Victoria stared at me. "You're worth $500 million. On paper." She laughed, but it came out as a sob. "On paper. Maya, I just got promoted to senior marketing director. I make $180,000 a year and I thought I was successful. I posted about family success without the loser, while you were sitting in your apartment worth $500 million. Money isn't the only measure of success," I said. "Your promotion is genuinely impressive. You worked hard for it." "Stop being nice to me," she said. "I don't deserve it. I've been horrible to you." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Despite the designer dress and the hotel celebration, she looked smaller than I'd seen her in years. Vulnerable. "Victoria, do you know why I dropped out of law school?" She shook her head. "Because I realized I was only there because it was what everyone expected. High-achieving Asian daughter becomes lawyer, makes parents proud, follows the approved path. But I was miserable. So you started a tech company instead?" "I started solving a problem that fascinated me. The company grew out of the solution. For 3 years, while you all thought I was failing, I was actually building something that could change how businesses understand their customers. The money is just a byproduct." Victoria was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "I owe you more than an apology." "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do. I owe you respect. I owe you support. I owe you the benefit of the doubt I should have given you 3 years ago." She paused. "And I owe you a public apology for that post." I pulled out my phone and showed her the notifications. "Victoria, that post has created a situation neither of us asked for. People are sharing screenshots, creating memes, turning this into a story about family dynamics and success. I didn't want this kind of attention." She looked at the screen, scrolling through hundreds of comments and shares. "Oh God, Maya. What can I do?" "Help me control the narrative," I said. "If you're willing." Victoria nodded immediately. "Anything." I opened Instagram and began drafting a new post. "We're going to tell the real story." The post I wrote was simple. Tonight was supposed to be about celebrating my sister Victoria's incredible promotion to senior marketing director at Morrison & Associates. She's worked incredibly hard and deserves every bit of recognition. What nobody expected was Forbes dropping their 30 under 30 list at the same time. I'm honored to be included and I'm grateful that my AI platform is helping companies serve customers better. But the most important thing is this: Victoria and I are both following paths that matter to us. Success isn't a competition, especially not between sisters. Proud of you, V. Let's celebrate together next time. Red heart, #sister support, #different paths same goals, #proud of each other. Victoria read it twice, tears streaming down her face. "Maya, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. Because it's true." She posted a response within minutes. "My sister is not only brilliant and successful, she's a better person than I deserve. Maya, I'm sorry for everything. Your path was never traditional, but it was always authentic. I should have supported you instead of judging you. Proud to be your sister. Can we start over?" Red heart. By 2 a.m. the social media storm had shifted completely. Instead of mockery and schadenfreude, the comments were filled with people praising our mutual support and discussing the different ways success can look. As we finally prepared to leave the hotel, Victoria hugged me tightly. Maya, can I ask you something? Of course. What happens now? With the company, with everything. I thought about my studio apartment, my ramen noodle dinners, my 3-year-old laptop. Then I thought about the Series D funding round David had mentioned, the international expansion plans, the possibility of going public within 2 years. How I keep building, I said. The recognition is nice, but the work is what matters. I want to help businesses understand their customers better, create more personalized experiences, make commerce more human. And personally? I smiled. I think I'll finally buy a real bed. Maybe upgrade from ramen to actual groceries. Victoria laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her in years. Can I help you apartment hunt? I know you're worth $500 million, but I also know you'll probably look at studio apartments to save money. You know me too well. As we walked to our cars, Victoria said quietly, Maya, I want you to know, I never really thought you were a loser. I was scared. Scared of what? Scared that you were brave enough to chase something that mattered to you while I was just following a script. Scared that your unconventional path might actually work while I was playing it safe. Scared that you'd prove that success doesn't have to look like what everyone expects. I stopped walking. Victoria. Yeah. You're not playing it safe. You're building a career in an industry you love, working with brands and campaigns that reach millions of people. That takes courage too. She smiled through her tears. Different kinds of courage. Exactly. 6 months later, Victoria and I had lunch every Tuesday. She'd moved to a smaller marketing firm where she had more creative control, taking a pay cut but finding work that energized her. I'd moved to a 2-bedroom apartment, still modest by tech CEO standards, but with an actual bed and a kitchen suitable for cooking real food. Nexus Analytics had grown to 847 employees across 4 countries. The Series D funding had closed at a $2.3 billion valuation, officially making me the youngest female billionaire in artificial intelligence. But more importantly, our platform was helping small businesses compete with major corporations by understanding their customers better. The Forbes recognition had changed everything in nothing. The work remained the same, solving problems that mattered, building technology that served people, growing a company based on authentic value rather than hype. And Victoria had become my closest advisor on something I'd never expected to need help with: how to handle success publicly while staying true to the values that had built that success in the first place. The thing about being called the loser, I told her during one of our Tuesday lunches, is that it taught me the difference between external validation and internal purpose. Meaning I didn't build Nexus Analytics to prove anyone wrong. I built it because the technology fascinated me and the problem needed solving. The recognition is nice, but it's not why I get up in the morning. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. I think I'm finally learning that lesson too. What do you mean? I spent so much energy trying to look successful that I forgot to focus on doing work that actually fulfilled me. The promotion was real, but it was also performance. Now I'm trying to focus more on the work and less on how the work appears to others. I raised my coffee cup. To different paths, same goals? She clinked her cup against mine. To different paths, same goals. And to sisters who figure out how to support each other, eventually. As we finished lunch and prepared to return to our respective offices, her marketing agency, my AI company, I reflected on how much had changed since that night at the Meridian Hotel. The Forbes recognition had been a catalyst, but the real transformation was deeper. 2 sisters learning that success doesn't require diminishing someone else's journey. My phone buzzed with a notification from our family group chat. Mom had shared an article about Nexus Analytics being named to Incorporated Magazine's Companies to Watch list with a proud caption, "Both our daughters are changing the world in their own ways." Victoria saw the notification and grinned. Look at that. No mention of anyone being the loser. Character development, I said. For all of us. Walking back to my office, I thought about the studio apartment where I'd received that first Forbes notification, the years of 18-hour days, the choice to pursue something unconventional despite family skepticism. The path had been difficult, but it had been authentically mine. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and determined enough, the world catches up to what you've been building all along. The baby shower my cousin Jessica had organized was supposed to be a celebration, but 30 minutes into the party, it felt more like an intervention. gathered in Mom's living room, surrounded by pastel decorations and tiny gift bags. 20 female relatives sat in a circle that felt more like a tribunal than a celebration. I was 7 months pregnant, visibly showing and, according to my family, woefully unprepared for motherhood. "Babies are expensive, honey," my Aunt Patricia said, her tone dripping with concern as she adjusted her designer handbag. "Diapers, formula, childcare, medical bills. Have you really thought this through?" I kept my hands folded over my growing belly, trying to stay calm. "I've thought about it extensively." "But Rebecca," my cousin Jessica chimed in, "you work for some tech startup, right? Those companies fold all the time. What happens if you lose your job while you're on maternity leave?" "I'll figure it out," I said quietly. This wasn't the first time my family had expressed concerns about my pregnancy. Ever since I'd announced I was expecting, every family gathering had included unsolicited advice about the financial realities of raising children. "Rebecca works in computers," Mom explained to the group as if that clarified everything. "Something with software development. But you know how unstable those tech jobs are." "Exactly," Aunt Patricia said, warming to her favorite topic. "My friend's daughter worked for 3 different tech companies that went out of business. Now she's back living with her parents." My sister-in-law Michelle nodded sagely. "And childcare costs are astronomical. We pay $2,000 a month for daycare, and that's considered reasonable. Which is why I keep saying Rebecca should move back home," Mom said. "At least until the baby is older and she's financially stable." I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm managing fine in my apartment." "That tiny one-bedroom place?" Jessica laughed. "Rebecca, where is the baby supposed to sleep?" "In the closet." "I'm looking at larger apartments," I said. "With what money?" Aunt Patricia's voice rose with dramatic emphasis. "You can't afford to be a mother. Children need financial stability. They need college funds, health insurance, extracurricular activities. They need resources you simply don't have." The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. 20 women nodding in solemn agreement, all convinced they were witnessing a disaster in progress. "Patricia's right," my grandmother said sadly. "In my day, people didn't have children unless they could properly provide for them." "Maybe it's not too late to consider other options," my aunt continued. "There are families who are financially prepared to raise children. Families with established careers and stable incomes." I felt tears starting behind my eyes. "I'm not giving up my baby." "No one's saying give up," Jessica said quickly. "We're saying be realistic about whether you can provide the life a child deserves. What kind of life can a single mother working at a startup really provide?" Michelle added. "I mean, be honest with yourself." I was spared from answering by my cousin Emma, who was fiddling with the television remote. "Sorry everyone. I was trying to put on music, but the news is on." "Just leave it," Mom said. "We're having an important conversation." But the television had captured everyone's attention because a familiar logo filled the screen. The logo of Riverside General Hospital, where I planned to deliver my baby. "Oh, this should be interesting," Aunt Patricia said. "Riverside General is always in the news for something. Usually budget problems." The news anchor appeared on screen with a bright smile. "Good afternoon. I'm here at Riverside General Hospital for a very special announcement. The hospital has just received the largest single donation in its history, $25 million, to fund a completely new state-of-the-art maternity wing." The room went quiet. Even my family's intervention paused for major news. The generous donation comes from Rebecca Chin, CEO and founder of Novatech Solutions, the artificial intelligence company that's been making headlines for its groundbreaking healthcare applications. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me, but kept my attention focused on the television screen. Ms. Chin, who is expecting her first child, says she wanted to ensure that every mother and baby in our community has access to the very best maternal health care, regardless of their economic circumstances. The camera cut to a live press conference at the hospital, where I could see myself on screen, standing beside the hospital administrator and several doctors. I was wearing the navy maternity dress I'd bought specifically for the announcement, looking professional and confident despite being 7 months pregnant. The new Chin Family Maternity Center will feature 12 private birthing suites, a Level 4 neonatal intensive care unit, and the most advanced maternal monitoring technology available, my televised self was saying. Every expectant mother deserves access to excellent health care, and this facility will ensure that no one in our community lacks access to world-class maternal care. The silence in Mom's living room was deafening. Dr. Martinez, the hospital's chief of obstetrics, appeared on screen next. Ms. Chen's donation will transform maternal health care in our region. The new wing will serve over 3,000 births annually and provide specialized care for high-risk pregnancies. This is a game-changer for maternal and infant health outcomes. The news anchor returned. Novatech Solutions, founded just 4 years ago, has grown into one of the region's most successful AI companies, with annual revenues exceeding $180 million. Ms. Chen, who holds advanced degrees in computer science and biomedical engineering, started the company in her apartment and has grown it into a major healthcare technology provider. Jessica's mouth was hanging open. Michelle had dropped her gift bag. Aunt Patricia looked like she'd seen a ghost. The Chen Family Maternity Center is expected to open 18 months from now, just as Ms. Chen's own baby reaches toddlerhood. When asked why she chose to make such a significant donation while expecting her first child, Ms. Chen said she wanted to create a world where every child, including her own, has access to the best possible start in life. The news segment concluded with shots of the hospital's architectural plans for the new wing, featuring spacious birthing suites, family lounges, and cutting-edge medical equipment. Emma finally found her voice to turn off the television, but the silence continued for another full minute. Finally, Aunt Patricia whispered, "Rebecca, that was you on television." "Yes," I said simply. "You donated $25 million to the hospital." "Yes." Mom was staring at me like I was a stranger. "Rebecca, you're the CEO of Novatech Solutions?" "I founded the company 4 years ago. We develop AI systems for healthcare applications, diagnostic tools, treatment planning software, patient monitoring systems." "But you said you worked in tech," Jessica said weakly. "I do work in tech. I run a tech company." "A tech company worth?" Michelle was frantically Googling on her phone. "Oh my God. Novatech Solutions annual revenue $180 million. Estimated company valuation $400 million. Rebecca Chen, founder and CEO, net worth estimated at $240 million. The numbers hung in the air like smoke. $240 million? Grandmother whispered. "Estimates vary," I said. "But the company is doing well." Aunt Patricia was reading over Michelle's shoulder. Forbes 30 Under 30. Healthcare Innovation Award. MIT Technology Review Innovator of the Year. She looked up at me. "Rebecca, you're on the Forbes list?" "Last year, yes." "And you never told us?" I shifted in my chair, trying to find a comfortable position. "I tried to tell you about the company. Every time I mentioned Novatech or the AI healthcare work, someone said tech startups were too risky or unstable." The memory of previous conversations hung in the room. "Remember Christmas dinner?" I continued. "I mentioned landing a major hospital contract, and you said I shouldn't get my hopes up because tech companies fail all the time." Aunt Patricia winced. "But we didn't know you were the CEO. I told you I founded the company. You assumed that meant I was struggling in a garage somewhere." Mom was still processing. "Rebecca, if you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, why do you live in that tiny apartment?" "Because I don't need a mansion and I'd rather invest the money in growing the company and supporting causes I care about." "Like the maternity wing," Emma said. "Like ensuring every mother has access to excellent health care, regardless of her economic situation." The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. Jessica was scrolling through more search results. "Rebecca, there are dozens of articles about you. Young CEO revolutionizes healthcare AI. From MIT dropout to healthcare innovator. Novatech Solutions, the startup that's changing medicine." "MIT dropout?" Mom asked. "I left my PhD program after 2 years to focus on the company full-time. The technology was developing faster than I could complete academic research." "And now you employ how many people?" Michelle was reading from her phone. 437 as of last month. Aunt Patricia sat back in her chair looking dazed. "Rebecca, I just spent 20 minutes telling you that you can't afford to have a baby." "I heard. While you were planning to donate $25 million to build a maternity wing. The donation was finalized 2 weeks ago. Today was just the public announcement." And you're having your baby in a maternity wing that you personally funded. That wasn't really the point, but yes, I suppose so. Mom was crying quietly. Sweetheart, why didn't you correct us? Why did you let us worry about your finances? I considered the question while looking around the room at 20 women who had spent the past hour convinced they were witnessing financial irresponsibility. Because I wanted to know that you cared about me and my baby regardless of my bank account, I said. If I'd started by announcing my net worth, would your concern have been about my well-being or about my money? The question lingered uncomfortably. But we made you feel terrible, Jessica said. We spent your baby shower questioning whether you should be having a child. You were concerned about a baby's welfare. That's actually exactly what I'd want from family, people who care about children having good lives. Even when we were completely wrong about your situation? Emma asked. You weren't wrong to care about financial stability for children. You were just wrong about my financial stability. Aunt Patricia leaned forward. Rebecca, can I ask why you live so modestly if you're worth so much? Because money is a tool for solving problems, not for displaying status. The apartment meets my needs. The car is reliable. I'd rather spend money on expanding healthcare AI research than on luxury items I don't actually want. But the maternity wing donation, that's enormous. Maternal mortality rates in our region are 40% higher than the national average, primarily due to lack of access to specialized care. The new wing will save lives and improve outcomes for thousands of families. Michelle was still reading. Rebecca, this article says Novatech's diagnostic AI has been implemented in over 200 hospitals nationwide. 234 as of this month. And your software helps doctors diagnose diseases? Our AI systems analyze medical imaging, lab results, and patient data to identify potential diagnoses that human doctors might miss. We've helped diagnose thousands of cases of cancer, heart disease, and neurological conditions in earlier stages. You're saving lives, grandmother said quietly. The technology is saving lives. I just built the systems that make it possible. The room was quiet for several minutes as everyone processed this information. Finally, Mom spoke. Rebecca, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. Mom, you don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. I spent this entire pregnancy worrying about your financial security while you were running a company that's changing healthcare. I suggested you move back home while you were literally funding a hospital wing. You were being a caring mother, I said. That's exactly what I wanted. But we made you feel like we didn't believe in your ability to provide for your child. You made me feel like you cared about my child's well-being. There's a difference. Aunt Patricia was shaking her head. Rebecca, I feel like such an idiot. I told you that you couldn't afford to be a mother while you were in the process of donating more money to maternal health care than most people see in a lifetime. The donation wasn't about proving I can afford motherhood. It was about ensuring that affordability doesn't determine the quality of maternal care any mother receives. Including mothers who really can't afford premium health care, Jessica said, understanding dawning in her voice. Especially those mothers. Emma raised her hand tentatively. Rebecca, can I ask what it's like? Running a company that big. Complex, I said. Every decision affects hundreds of employees and thousands of patients. There's enormous responsibility in developing technology that doctors rely on for life and death diagnoses. And stressful? Mom asked. Sometimes. But also incredibly fulfilling. When I get emails from doctors saying our AI helped them catch a cancer case they would have missed, or from families whose loved ones received better care because of our technology, that makes every difficult day worthwhile. Is that why you wanted to have a baby now? Michelle asked. While the company is doing so well? I placed my hands on my belly, feeling the baby move. I wanted to have a baby because I'm ready to be a mother. The company's success means I can provide financial stability, but more importantly, it means I'm doing work that makes the world a little bit better for the next generation. And you'll keep running the company after the baby is born? Jessica asked. With modifications. I'm building a management structure that allows for more delegation. The goal is to maintain growth while also being present for my child. Rebecca, Aunt Patricia said quietly, I need to ask your forgiveness. I questioned your readiness for motherhood while you were demonstrating exactly the kind of forward-thinking responsibility that makes someone an excellent parent. Patricia, you were looking out for a baby's welfare. That's exactly the kind of aunt I want my child to have. But I was so wrong about your circumstances. You were right about what children need: stability, security, and people who care about their well-being. I'm grateful my child will have all of that. The party gradually resumed, but with a completely different energy. Instead of an intervention about financial irresponsibility, it became a celebration of impending motherhood with family members who finally understood the full picture. Rebecca, Mom said as we opened baby gifts, I have one more question. What's that? With everything you've accomplished, are you nervous about becoming a mother? I thought about the question while unwrapping a tiny sleeper decorated with ducks. Terrified, I said honestly. Running a company is complicated, but at least I understand technology and business strategy. Raising a human being is infinitely more complex and important. But you'll figure it out, Grandmother said confidently. Someone who can build a multimillion-dollar company from nothing can certainly learn to change diapers and handle 2 a.m. feedings. I hope so. And now your baby will be born in a hospital wing you personally funded, Emma said with a smile. With pediatric specialists and neonatal intensive care that wouldn't have existed otherwise, I added. Rebecca, Jessica said, I think your baby is going to have exactly the kind of life every child deserves. A mother who cares deeply about making the world better and has the resources to act on that caring. 3 months later, I delivered a healthy baby girl in the Chin Family Maternity Center's birthing suite number 7. The care was exceptional, the facility was beautiful, and every staff member was committed to providing the best possible experience for new mothers and babies. But the most meaningful part was looking around the maternity wing and knowing that hundreds of other families would benefit from the same level of care, regardless of their ability to pay for it. At my daughter's first birthday party, held in the same living room where my baby shower had taken place, Aunt Patricia gave a toast to Emma Rose Chin, who is lucky enough to have a mother who not only can afford to give her everything she needs, but who uses her success to ensure that every child has access to the best possible care. And to Rebecca, who taught us that the most important financial planning for parenthood isn't about accumulating wealth. It's about using whatever resources you have to build a better world for the next generation. As I looked around the room at my family holding my healthy 1-year-old daughter, I reflected on how much had changed since that difficult baby shower. The concern my family had expressed about financial readiness for motherhood had been genuine, even if misdirected. And their commitment to my daughter's well-being, once they understood the full picture, had been unwavering. My phone buzzed with a notification from the hospital. Chin Family Maternity Center celebrates 1,000th birth with 100% healthy outcomes for mothers and babies. I smiled, bouncing Emma Rose on my knee. Building a successful company had been challenging, but building a better world for her generation, that was the real measure of successful parenthood.